Love, love, until I feel the breath of the Spirit flowing in me.
Welcome. You're watching Spirit of Life, and today we're speaking with Lyle Shelton, who's the Managing Director of the Australian Christian Lobby. Thanks for coming in, Lyle.
Yeah, pleasure, Norm.
Australian Christian Lobby. Tell us about that.
Well, Norm, ACL was formed some 18 or so years ago. It really came to prominence, I guess, 13 years ago when my predecessor, Jim Wallace, left a very prestigious military career at the rank of brigadier. And he really took on, I guess, what was a fledgling organisation and gave it some prominence. And I guess when someone of his character and notoriety steps out of a career like he did, having commanded Australia's SAS regiment and the mechanised brigade, leaving all that behind, the opportunity of further promotion to bring a Christian voice into politics. I guess that raised a few eyebrows and got attention, and he really brought the organisation, I guess, to the prominence that we see it today through his great pioneering work over 13 years.
And how does it fit into, there's many lobby groups. How does it fit into that? What's the lobby community look like?
Well, there's all sorts of groups in a democratic society like Australia's, bringing influence into politics, influence into government. And I guess Jim's vision was to look at the Christian constituency and to say, well, hang on, this is a large constituency in Australian society, yet it didn't have any real organising ability to bring a coordinated voice into politics. Now, there's, I guess, denominational groups such as the Catholic Bishops' Conference, of course, and other denominations doing their part, but to really rally Christians right across the board and to bring a Christian perspective into politics, there really was a vacuum. And so Jim's vision and myself now and the rest of the team that are with us is to bring a Christian perspective into the heart of government, both at state and federal level, so that we have a say where the decisions are being made.
Okay, well, you're looking at a government which is about to legislate on something controversial, say abortion. How do you make your voice heard? How does that lobbying happen?
Yeah, I guess on a couple of levels, Norm. We've just recently, for instance, seen abortion, as you mentioned, become an issue in the Tasmanian Parliament. So we rally grassroots Christians right across the state and Tasmania to put in submissions to parliamentary inquiries, to email their MPs and to make sure that our perspective is there. We would also work with other groups, other Christian groups, denominations, bring leaders together to go and see politicians. So very coordinated. And then at a parliamentary level, working through relationship, would go and make appointments to see individual MPs and to put our point across. So there's a whole range of levels that we would interact and try and bring influence to bear.
So you actually do go to the face-to-face level with the politician or politicians? Absolutely.
A core aspect of what we try and do is to work through relationship, and because we're fortunate enough to have good people working for the organisation in each of the states and also at the federal level as lobbyists, they're able to build those relationships across both sides of Parliament. We're non-party partisan, and so we work with both sides, and it really is through relationship that we seek to get things done.
Yes, so just you raised a point there about activating the local Christian community. How do they actually become involved in the ACL? Is there some way that just rank and file Christians can be involved?
Yeah, I guess it's happened over the years as people like Jim and our state directors and myself now more recently go around the country speaking to church groups of all different configurations, might be men's groups, women's groups, churches themselves, and just through that sort of grassroots interaction, people sign up to the organisation as supporters. They can jump on our website and receive our emails. That way we're able to notify them of specific campaigns when it's important for us to lobby, to get emails flowing through, and I tell you, it makes a difference. We know that then as we walk the corridors of our parliaments, the MPs will often say, we're getting the emails from your side, or we're getting them from the other side of the debate. Please get some more coming in so that we can say that there's support for the particular issue that we might be lobbying on.
So you have a bit of a volunteer base then. in a way.
Very much so. I mean, we're a grassroots organisation. Some of your viewers, Norm, might be familiar with the Get Up organisation, for instance.
Yes.
I guess we operate on similar principles, and we've been going longer, of course, but it really is grassroots people using the internet a lot to email directly to politicians. But we also encourage people to go and build a relationship with their local MP. We encourage church leaders to go and be active in the political process. We live in a participatory democracy. That's a good thing. And it's important that Christians, like other community groups, participate. And that's the only way our voice can be heard. So we think that's really important.
Yes, it certainly sounds like a well-coordinated operation. Do you have an annual conference or somewhere where people can come collectively in the one place?
Yeah, we do. That's obviously an important part of what we do, to provide a forum for big ideas, for policy ideas, to engage senior political leaders. So every year we have a national conference, and we will invite usually the Prime Minister or the opposition leader to come. And over the years we've been pretty successful in getting, we've had PMs and opposition leaders come on more than one occasion to our annual conferences. And then in an election year we'll generally put on a webcast event. So this year we had an election panel, a bit like a Q&A style panel that we webcast to 300 churches around the country. We had the former Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson, the former Labor Attorney General Robert McClellan on that panel, as well as some other Christian experts to discuss the key issues of the election. And we also had a video message from Kevin Rudd and from Tony Abbott, which was played live exclusively to that audience. So that's the sort of thing we'll do during election time, and then annual conferences in the non-election years.
Yes, the election time, it takes you off down a more concentrated pathway, I'd imagine.
It does. Elections are a very strategic time for us at ACL, both state and federal elections, and we use that to demonstrate the size and the engagement of the Christian constituency. So we'll be running Meet Your Candidate forums in as many local electorates as we can, particularly targeting marginal seats, encouraging Christians to come out and hear what the candidates have to say, to ask them questions about where they stand on a whole range of issues, social justice issues, marriage and family issues. And then we'll also produce sophisticated websites for each election where we ask the parties their policies on key issues, usually about 20 or so key questions, and the parties have been good enough to give us detailed policy answers that we then publish on the website and then distribute widely.
And detailed policy answers take a long time to deliver, and we're out of time. You're watching Spirit of Life. Join us after the break. Welcome back. We're speaking with Lyle Shelton, and he's the Managing Director of the Australian Christian Lobby. Lyle, in Australia as a multicultural, multi-faith country, there's lots of lobby groups, I suspect, for other religions. Do you ever find yourself in a common space where there's an issue which spreads across other faiths?
Yeah, certainly there's a lot of common ground between particularly the Abrahamic faiths, Jews and Muslims, on issues like pro-life issues, marriage being between a man and a woman, and I think on some of the social justice issues as well, about poverty and justice. So there certainly is commonality. We would certainly have some informal dialogue, but principally we do operate on behalf of a Christian constituency, but yes, certainly open to dialogue where there is common ground.
Well, you have a magazine too, don't you? Is it Viewpoint, it's called?
Yes, it is Viewpoint. It's a public policy journal. We've turned it more into an e-journal at the moment. The costs of publishing is quite expensive, as you can appreciate, and we've transformed it into a web portal, which is a great resource of public policy on a range of issues that we cover right across the board. If people want to plumb the depths of detail in policy, the Viewpoint portal is the place to go.
And do you find that the modern communication facilities, that you use them, do you think you use them to the ultimate
Look, we're getting better. A lot of our lobbying and activism has been web-based, and we've got terrific online tools that help people. You know, you can key in your postcode; it'll tell you who your local MP is, and you can fire off an email using that platform. We've recently released an iPhone app, and we'll be able to put out push notifications directly to people's smartphones about when they should send an email into their local MP. And again, we're getting more and more sophisticated all the time. We're using vodcasting with video. So yeah, more and more we're trying to get on the front foot.
Absolutely, that sounds pretty impressive. Without divulging secrets, what would be the size of your constituency, the active constituency, would you say?
Well, Norm, there's about 15,000 people on our database who we're in regular contact with. But I guess the measure of our influence has been our ability to mobilise well beyond that. And for instance, in 2011, when the Labor Party was looking at changing their policy on marriage, we produced a petition of 120,000 people, which we think is the biggest petition ever raised by the church in Australia at that time. So we've certainly been able to have big reach. We've had over 100,000 people on webcasts before with the Prime Minister and the Opposition Leader back in 2007. So we certainly punch well above our weight.
Yes, it certainly sounds like it. And once again, without being specific, is there any particular faith group or Christian group which is stronger than the others? Are there a lot of Catholics that pop up, or a lot of what are the dominate?
You know, to be honest, Norm, I actually haven't done the breakdown. You know, our supporter base is quite broad. We know we've got people from pretty much every Christian denomination that are part of it. We're not a peak body for the church, so it's grassroots Christians who sign up. So there would be Catholics, there'd be Pentecostals, Baptists, Presbyterians, Seventh-day Adventists, Copts, and many, many others that I haven't named. So we enjoy broad support, and we also have great cooperation with denominational leaders. About 14 or so denominations are in regular cooperation or contact with us, and again that spans the broad breadth of Christianity in this nation. So we're very fortunate to have that level of cooperation.
In this climate where Christianity is taking a bit of a beating in some areas, do you find that in the political context that there are some people whom you just can't speak to? They dismiss you before discussion?
That's a real minority. I find most people in the political world, in both state and federal parliament, are very happy to talk to ACL. There are those that are very hardened against anything to do with Christianity. Unfortunately, much of that does reside on the Greens side of the political spectrum, and that's disappointing. We like to work right across the political spectrum. But I think on the whole, most people in politics are pretty reasonable and reflect, I think, the broad tolerance of the Australian community and openness of the Australian community towards Christianity. I think most people recognise that this nation has been profoundly shaped by the Judeo-Christian ethic, and that's one of the reasons why it's such a great country today and why it's such a free country today. And I think there's a desire to hold on to those principles which have given us what we've got.
Yes. You mentioned Tasmania and the abortion bill there. That was a fairly contentious issue. Did you find that you were able to, because abortion is such an inflammatory topic, you're either for it or against it, it would appear. How does that, issues like, and same-sex marriage is similar, I guess. You need to be pretty diplomatic, wouldn't you?
Yes, and we're always trying to speak very carefully into the public space. We try and speak with compassion and love and grace, but also to present truth, and that can be a very difficult line to walk. Sometimes we get it wrong. I think mostly we get it right. No matter how gracious, though, there will always, unfortunately, be some people who will react and be quite upset at things that you say. But I think we do live in a free society, and I think there is a place for a voice for the defenceless, the unborn, and to stand up for issues like marriage. We are seeing an increasingly hostile environment where religious freedom through through the abortion issue and the same-sex marriage, is very much trying to constrain the freedom of Christians to operate in the public space. For instance, the Tasmanian abortion reform had a clause in the legislation which stops silent protest or vigil outside an abortion clinic, for instance. Same-sex marriage will restrict freedom of speech and freedom of religion if it ever comes in. So I think we need to be very aware of the trajectory of where some of these issues are taking us.
Yes, and some of the abortion issues, like I think it's Dr. Hobart with the conscientious objection. And so that would be one of the areas of considerable focus for ACL.
It is religious freedom, we think, is the next biggest issue on the horizon. And unfortunately, those who come from a very strong ideological basis, they're not always able to win their arguments. So what they're trying to do is use the law and use anti-discrimination law in particular as a blunt instrument to silence opposition. And we're seeing this with Dr. Mark Hobart here in Melbourne, who might have a conscientious objection to abortion, but the law compels him and others to actually go against their conscience, and that's a real shame.
Time compels me to interrupt you, Lyle. I'm sorry. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Spirit of Life, and we're speaking with Lyle Shelton, who's the Managing Director of the Australian Christian Lobby. Lyle, we're in a space of great contention with some of these issues, like homosexuality and abortion. And I just looked down, because I've been looking at your website, I looked down some of the issues which you've been involved in, as like sex selection, abortion bill, same-sex marriage, trafficked women, prostitution, surrogacy, abortion. You have other areas, though, that you spread over into, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all those issues are really important. We believe in human dignity. Obviously, we believe in the sanctity of marriage and family. But we have been very active on refugees, wanting to see our humanitarian intake into Australia increase. We're disappointed that the current Abbott government has cut the humanitarian intake from 26,000 down to 13,000. Yeah. We agree that we need to stop the boats and people smuggling and people dying at sea, but we shouldn't stop the refugees. We need to. I think we can be an open and generous country there. Overseas aid is another big one we've been involved in. It was disappointing to see the government 2 days before the September 7 election announce a cut to overseas aid, $4.5 billion over 4 years. That's a huge cut to the aid budget when the government had promised, both sides of politics had promised to increase our aid in line with our Millennium Development Goal commitment. So persecuted Christians is another one. Persecuted people groups, particularly in the Middle East. We see the conflict in Syria has put hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Christians, in fact millions, under duress. Yes. We'd like to see more humanitarian visas for them. And also we see Christians being persecuted in Egypt, the Copts there. So there's a range of issues across the board of what might be called justice and righteousness issues, to use that religious parlance, that we get involved in.
Yes, we're just talking about the religious parlance. How is it that you bring the message? Is it something where you're actually quoting from the Bible, or what's the basic theme when you go to someone?
Yeah, that's a good question, Norm. We never quote from the Bible, but obviously our faith is what gives us the ethic and the concern that we have for human rights, for justice, and which compels us into the public space. And I guess someone who I don't think anyone operates in a moral vacuum. Everyone has some sort of a worldview, and ours is motivated by our faith. But we always present based on evidence. Right. I believe that if you're someone of faith, that God is a rational God. He's given us minds, and we should use those minds to produce the best possible evidence for the case that we bring into politics.
Yes, clearly you're not going to fall back on a quotation from the Bible without supporting it with, as you say, evidence.
It's very rare that we would use the Bible. I can think of about one occasion in the last 6 years, and it needs to be in context. Obviously, we believe in the Bible and believe the ethic that comes from the Bible, of course, is what's made our legal and political system so great. I mean, without the Bible, where would Western law be? The Ten Commandments and the idea of separation of powers in our political system, or checks and balances, all of this comes from very biblical ideas. So the Bible is a great source book, but as we present into the public square, evidence, and I must say I've always found that evidence and can be marshalled very well for the issues that we bring. Very rarely do we have to say, well, we're lobbying on this just because the Bible says. Well, we can also marshal evidence. Faith and reason, I believe, are entirely compatible.
Yeah, and that sort of contrasts with some of the examples of lobbying which takes place in the United States, for example, in the Bible Belt states there. And that was the point for the question. You clearly, if you do it that way, you're not going to be very successful.
I think so. We've looked very closely at what our friends in the United States do, and unfortunately there's been a polarisation in politics over there. There's been a religious right created.
Yes.
That's why we are fiercely non-party partisan. We believe that issues of Christian concern transcend partisan politics, and we want to see the policy bar lifted right across the political spectrum.
Yes, so you're firmly making it an ethical issue sitting behind all of this. It's a matter of ethics.
Absolutely. There's a Christian ethic, but with reason marshalled and with strict non-partisanship. We believe we'd like to see both parties make themselves as attractive as possible to Christians. And I think you can be a Christian and support either side in good conscience. And there'll be some Christians who are attracted to social justice and labour market issues, trade union type issues, and I think that's entirely valid. There'll be others, Christians, who support free markets and the like, will be attracted to the liberal side of politics. But we'd like to see both sides present policies that attract Christians, regardless of which sort of spectrum on the left or the right they sit on.
Yes. So with the recent change of government and some fairly dramatic situations there, what would be your main thrust at the moment? What's the main policy issues that you're looking at?
Yeah, well, there's always a range of issues at any one time. I think it's fair to say this same-sex marriage issue has been a dominating issue in mainstream politics for the last 2 or 3 years, and so we've put a lot of time and effort into that. But we're also putting a lot of time and effort into trying to help persecuted people groups, vulnerable religious minorities in the Middle East, for instance, such as Christians and others. So there's always a range of issues. We're juggling all the time, but there's no doubt the marriage issue has occupied a disproportionate amount of our time. We hope we're coming to a settlement on that issue. I think I think it seems that the numbers are not there in the Parliament to change the definition of marriage. That's a good thing. So I think the challenge now is, how do we get back on the front foot on marriage? How do we help Australians to fall in love with the idea of marriage and the benefits it brings to society and to children in particular?
The opposition, say, on the issue of same-sex marriage, what's the colour of the opposition in the sense that are they atheists, or how do they describe themselves, or don't they describe themselves at all?
Well, I guess you'd have to ask them that question. I guess we've observed that it's a very small but very committed group of people who are pushing for this, and they have a lot of support in the media, and they have some support in politics, but it is very much a very small committed group, and I think those of us who believe that none of us want to see discrimination against same-sex attracted people at all, and we've supported the removal of all that, and there is none in Australian law against them, but the definition of marriage should remain between a man and a woman, because that tells us the best environment in which to raise children. Every child has the right to its biological mum and dad.
We're out of time on this fascinating topic, so thank you very much, Lyle, for coming. You've been watching Spirit of Life. We'll be back next week.